Hello, Steve White, Steve White's 89. I am a huge Friday the 13th fan. Every Friday the 13th, I watch all the films and all the special features and documentaries and whatever new stuff I can find. Recently, I've become aware of the Friday the 13th fan films because I wasn't really into fan films. I watched the Star Trek ones, but they were sort of different. I didn't really think anyone else was really doing them of any real quality. Then I saw the Halloween ones, the Friday the 13th ones, and I realised, oh, they're good, but I only watch Halloween films on Halloween and Friday the 13th on Friday the 13th, so I've kind of sort of been putting off looking at them. And I looked at a couple, and some of them were really bad, and I was kind of surprised because I really would have thought it's not a hard film to replicate. It's basically in the woods, all you need is a cabin or a house, and a guy in a Jason mask with decent makeup, and you should be able to do a good fan film. Even if you don't have all of that, you can hide some of it with the editing and so forth. It shouldn't be that hard. Some people fail miserably, but some do a really good job. Some look amazing, and some of the makeups for Jason, because the early Jason is just a guy, and when you hide the face, it's really just a guy in a mask. But the later ones, after he dies and becomes a zombie, they're quite intricate and complicated. So yeah, I'm just going to do two for now. I'm going to go through. I'm not going to review all of them. I'm just going to review the ones I thought were interesting or good, and hopefully make it a bit easier for some people to actually maybe find them. And I just like to talk about stuff, so here we go. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about is Camp Forest Green. It's one interesting thing for me that stands out is just the texture of the image. There's something about it's got a filmic quality, but it also looks like video, but it doesn't, and it's just got this really interesting quality to it that I like, that kept drawing me to it, even though one of the first scenes that I watched from it I hated, and it took me a couple of tries to watch the whole film because I hated this first scene where it's not the first scene, but the first scene I sort of looked at, where you have all the characters being introduced, where they're on the screen for a second talking and they pause and they show their names, and then I just find that really annoying and tacky. It's not something they did in Friday the 13th. It is an old sort of thing, but it's not like an old 80s thing, but it's not something Friday the 13th did, so it doesn't really work. Now, they would have been better off. Also, editing could have helped it a bit more, because it starts off with a scene with a guy at night calling the police because he heard a noise, and then he goes to investigate why his phone stopped working, and he gets killed. It's fairly well shot. It's very bright, very colourful. And then they go to a shot of these people walking through the woods, through a cemetery in the woods, carrying a bunch of stuff. And then they go to the shot of them walking towards the camera and the names and introductions and all that. And then they fade down to black and go to a shot of the cabin, like a nice moody sort of atmospheric shot of them approaching the cabin. If they had, and it's just jarring, if they had gone from the murder to the introduction and then to the shot of them walking through the forest and past the graveyard, which is a wide shot, and then gone into the shot of them approaching the cabin, it would have worked, but they do it in the opposite order. It just is really jarring. I would edit that out. It's just doesn't work. Now, the characters they don't really gel. They have a lot of forced drama and issues and aggression and confrontation in the film. It's only 20 minutes long. And yeah, the characters, they don't really work, but they're kind of almost interesting, but they're over the top, but I don't know, I kind of like them in a way, but yeah, they don't really work. What works for the film is some of the scenes with Jason actually are done quite well. They're actually a couple of are kind of suspenseful. And one is almost funny, where one of the characters has come downstairs with headphones on, and there's a whole fight scene between three people and Jason going on in the background. He doesn't even notice, and it's actually played fairly well. But the main thing for me is just the colour, the image. Just looking at it, it looks like I said, it's like film but not, but video but not, and bright. And the only thing that sort of hurts it in some ways is the colour at night. The lighting is so extreme. They have this bright green a lot of the time and bright red and other colours. And if they'd gone with a blue, they almost could have sold that sort of 80s sort of day for night, nighttime blue sort of colour a lot of scenes in a lot of movies sort of had, like Halloween and stuff like that. But instead they use green. It's just over the top. It kind of makes it interesting, but it kind of is too much. So I just found it interesting. So I included this one mainly for that. Now, the second one I looked at was called Death Curse. this is kind of interesting because it's I guess it's made in New Zealand. It's got Kiwi accents. It's really weird to see Friday the 13th characters, particularly one we already know as established with a Kiwi accent. They show close-ups of her face. They don't really show her because the actress looks nothing like Ginny. It's Ginny. Now, this guy basically shows up at his Aunt Ginny's cabin out in the woods, basically letting her know he's going to visit his Uncle Lewis, who's just bought a cabin by Crystal Lake. She, of course, warns him not to go there. And then she looks at a little necklace and she opens it and it's a picture of herself, like to let us know it's Ginny. I'm like, why would she have a picture of herself in her... like, little things don't make sense. It's all very random. We see a couple of guys out in the woods getting killed. The old guy in a mask for no reason jumps out, scares the guy, then Jason walks up and he's like, you're not going to fool me twice, and it's, of course, Jason, he kills him. And all with the Kiwi accents. It's just really weird. But what does sort of work is there's one scene up front. There's two scenes with Pamela Voorhees. One doesn't work, one does work. The first one where she's talking to Jason, even though her nice little jumper isn't quite right, well, the knitted jumper isn't quite right, but the actress kind of does a good job with some of the lines. One is really bad, but it kind of works. She's standing behind him, putting her hand on his shoulder, basically telling him in some sort of surreal dream world to like basically go and keep avenging their deaths and what was done to them. And then we have this guy, he doesn't find his uncle because his uncle's been killed. And when his uncle was killed, they used the worst scream. It sounds like the Ever Ready like ads. It just doesn't sound like a real person. And then he apparently goes and drinks and stays out at night. He comes back. He still can't find his uncle. He goes to Jenny's cabin again, and he finds a bunch of old clippings that she kept, and he's like, oh my God, it is true. This happened to, her. And then he goes out. He goes to try and find his uncle. And the audio is really bad as well in some parts. It's really quiet. You can't hear the dialogue, but the music is really loud. So he's yelling for his uncle in the woods, but you can barely hear him. But then when the music comes up, it's really loud. But the fight scenes with Jason looks good. And the fight scenes are kind of interesting. And some of the photography is good. But overall, it's not great. But there's a few little moments. And just for the Kiwi accents, I just couldn't forget it. And also the Pamela was interesting. The second Pamela scene is ridiculous. They show a grave, which is Pamela Voorhees written on sticks, like a cross stick, when we know she had a cement grave. Because they replicate the Camp Crystal Lake with the Camp Blood written on it really well, and they replicate some of the elements really well, like the newspaper clippings and stuff like that. But other parts don't quite work. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, and I'm guessing they're all going to be like this. So I'm being fairly generous, I think, to some of them and including them as like interesting. They may not be good. I may not want to watch them again, but they're interesting. But the second scene, like I said, he like comes across her grave randomly when he's walking around, and then he has a flashback of her sitting there, but she's got like a face painted black, and there's a moment where she's holding her own head, which does look good, it does look real, but her face is painted black, and she's like got black fluid coming out of her mouth when she's talking up close, and it's meant to be ghoulish and paranormal and strange, but this is a bit too much. Just her ghost was enough, but her sort of as some sort of black-faced zombie was a bit too much. So there's one scene that works, one that doesn't. There are, elements that work, elements that don't. The cinematography is really nice. Some shots of the environment are really beautiful, but then he edits it to this music which is too choppy, and so it's a mixed bag. But the way it ends is kind of funny. He lures Jason into a shed which has been covered in petrol with a bunch of gas cylinders open, and he blows him up. And there's this giant little CGI explosion, like in this, I think, real location. And then, of course, he gets up and survives and drives off, even though he's been stabbed right through his chest, which really should be going through his heart, like literally with a machete this big. And he still gets up and walks and drives, fights, walks and drives. And then, of course, the last shot is Jason's hand bursting up through the rubble of the burnt, blown up shed. So I think I mostly like it for the Kiwi accents and some of the cinematography. But yeah, so those are the first two I've watched, and I can't believe it took me 10 minutes to get through two 20-minute short fan films. because I'm going to get to the longer ones last. I'm going to watch all the short ones first, the ones that look good, and then